She was driving home, just another night on the highway, unaware that the flashing lights behind her would change everything. A routine pullover, or so it seemed, turned into a tense moment of judgment, suspicion, and fear. The officers had no idea who they were stopping. They didn't know that the woman behind the wheel wasn't just anyone. She was a United States judge, a force of law and authority. In seconds, the balance of power would shift, exposing bias, arrogance, and a system quick to underestimate those it should respect. How would this ordinary traffic stop turn into a reckoning they'd never forget? It was an ordinary evening, the sun just disappearing behind the horizon, painting the highway in soft shades of orange and gray. Judge Naomi Williams had just finished a long day in court, her mind racing with cases, decisions, and the weight of justice she carried daily. She was tired, yes, but there was a quiet pride in her work, a knowledge that her choices impacted lives and upheld the law. The highway stretched ahead. Nearly empty, the hum of her tires against the asphalt a comforting rhythm. She liked these drives, moments of solitude where the city's chaos felt miles away. But tonight, the calm was about to shatter. In her rearview mirror, flashing red and blue lights appeared, startling against the dim glow of the highway. A routine traffic stop, or so it seemed, was about to unfold. She pulled over, hands steady on the wheel, heart beating a little faster. These were officers she had never met, their intentions unknown. Their faces hidden behind shadows and uniforms, their assumptions invisible yet palpable. What they didn't know was who she was. Naomi Williams wasn't just a driver. She was a judge of the United States courts, a woman whose decisions had toppled careers, exposed corruption, and demanded accountability from those in power. And now, in this unexpected moment, she would confront a system that too often misjudged people by their appearance, race, or gender. The tension hung thick in the air, the night suddenly sharper, colder. Every second stretched, charged with uncertainty. What began as a routine pullover was about to test assumptions, expose bias, and set the stage for a reckoning that neither Naomi nor the officers could have anticipated. The flashing lights reflected off the asphalt as Judge Naomi Williams sat calmly, yet her mind was alert. The officers approached, their boots crunching against the gravel, eyes scanning her with suspicion she had seen too many times before. She could feel the weight of assumptions pressing down, the invisible judgments rooted not in her actions, but in the color of her skin. "Evening, ma'am," one officer said, tone polite but rigid. Naomi responded with a measured nod, her hands visible on the steering wheel. Inside, she could sense their uncertainty, the hesitation masked by protocol. Every gesture she made was analyzed, every pause questioned. They didn't realize that this was more than a routine stop. It was a clash between authority and prejudice, law and bias. A second officer arrived and the tension thickened. Their whispers were sharp, their eyes flicking to her license and registration. Naomi remained composed, outwardly calm, yet her pulse quickened. The injustice was tangible. They assumed, they doubted, they scrutinized, simply because of her appearance. In her years on the bench, she had seen this same pattern repeated countless times, people judged before they were known. Then came the moment of escalation. The lead officer leaned closer, his voice tightening. "Step out of the vehicle, please." Naomi obeyed, walking with steady determination, each step deliberate. She could feel the crowding tension, the invisible pressure that had so many before her faltering. But she did not falter. Her identity as a judge was not yet revealed, and the officers remained unaware of the power she wielded in the courts. Behind the wheel, the car remained still, an unassuming witness to the scene unfolding. Passers-by glanced curiously from the highway, some sensing the conflict, others oblivious. Naomi's mind raced. She understood the stakes. This encounter could escalate, be recorded, misinterpreted, or weaponized. But she also knew that composure, knowledge, and courage could turn the tables. The tension reached its peak as one officer questioned her authority, a subtle jab that revealed deep-seated bias. Naomi met his gaze evenly, unwavering. In that instant, the pullover became a silent battlefield, her every move a demonstration of restraint, dignity, and quiet power. She had faced courtrooms filled with doubt and hostility before. This was just another arena where injustice attempted to assert itself. And then came the moment that would shift everything, the realization on the officers' faces when they glanced at her ID and credentials. Their assumptions would crumble, their arrogance exposed, and the balance of power would flip in a heartbeat. What had begun as routine would end as a reckoning they would never forget. Naomi had not just stopped for protocol. She had become the living embodiment of law, authority, and unassailable truth. The lead officer finally glanced at the ID in Naomi's hand. His eyes widened, disbelief etched across his face. You're a judge?" he stammered, his voice cracking with a mixture of shock and embarrassment. The other officer froze, caught mid-step, realizing too late that they had underestimated the woman standing before them. For a heartbeat, time seemed to suspend. The highway was quiet, the hum of distant cars fading into the background. Naomi stood tall, calm but commanding, radiating authority that no uniform or badge could rival. The power dynamic had shifted instantly. What had begun as routine suspicion now exposed arrogance, bias, and the fragility of unchecked assumptions. The officers scrambled for composure. Fumbling with their words, their earlier confidence evaporated. Naomi's presence was magnetic, undeniable, and in that moment, the truth was clear. They had judged her before knowing her. The realization hit them harder than any reprimand could have, but Naomi did not gloat or scold. Instead, she let her silence speak, letting the weight of their misjudgments settle upon them. Every glance, every gesture conveyed the same unspoken truth. Authority is not granted by uniform alone, it is earned through integrity, knowledge, and courage. Passers-by who had stopped to watch now murmured among themselves, sensing the magnitude of the moment. Cameras captured it all, phones recorded, and whispers of awe and disbelief spread through the crowd. Naomi had transformed a simple traffic stop into a public reckoning, a powerful exposure of prejudice in real time. Finally, with a composed voice, she instructed them to follow protocol properly, turning what could have been humiliation into a lesson. As she returned to her car, the officers' expressions were unreadable, ashamed, humbled, and aware that their assumptions had nearly cost them dignity. In seconds, the balance of power had flipped. Naomi had not only preserved her own authority, but she had unveiled a harsh truth. Prejudice hides everywhere, even in uniforms sworn to uphold the law. One routine night, one pullover, and one woman had transformed a moment of potential injustice into a lesson that would resonate far beyond the highway. As Naomi drove away, the highway lights blurred into streaks of white and gold. Yet her mind remained sharp, replaying the encounter over and over. What had started as a routine pullover had become a profound lesson in justice, bias, and the consequences of assumptions. She had remained calm, composed, and in control, but the impact of the moment extended far beyond her own experience. The officers, humbled and visibly shaken, were left to reckon with their actions and prejudices. For them, the encounter would serve as a reminder. Authority is not merely about badges or uniforms, it is about fairness, respect, and recognizing the humanity in everyone. They had been forced to confront their bias, and that confrontation would linger far longer than any reprimand. For Naomi, the night reinforced a deeper truth about the world she navigated daily. Even those sworn to uphold the law are not immune to prejudice, yet courage, knowledge, and integrity can challenge assumptions and spark change. One woman's poise had turned a tense moment into a quiet reckoning, demonstrating that justice is not only a courtroom mandate but a lived principle. By morning, whispers of the incident had spread, shared across social media, discussed in offices, and dissected in newsrooms. People marveled at the courage and dignity displayed, reminded that moments of quiet authority can confront injustice more powerfully than any loud protest. Naomi had not sought attention, yet her actions inspired reflection, accountability, and awareness. And as she continued her journey home, a thought lingered. How many times do people judge before they know the truth? How often does bias shape encounters, decisions, and lives? The answer remained uncertain, But Naomi's experience proved one thing undeniably: integrity. Courage and calm authority can transform even a routine night into a lesson the world cannot ignore.